emergency crossover. Locked on Big 12 and Locked on Zags. I'm Josh Neighbors, the host of Locked on Big 12. Andy Patton is the host of Locked on Zags. We got some really curious, weird news that we did not think was coming today. Andy and I had no idea we'd be talking, but thanks to Pete Thamel, we are. Gonzaga and the Big 12 have had conversations about linking, joining up, becoming one. Gonzaga joining the Big 12. And Andy, there's so many angles to this, but at first, what were your thoughts when you saw this Pete Thamel article on a random Wednesday afternoon in November?
My first thought, quite legitimately, was about how I got very little done at work yesterday and how I needed to have a very productive afternoon of work today. I had just been telling my wife, here are the 5 things I'm going to get done today so I can feel good about watching the exhibition game tonight. And then this happened less than 5 minutes later. And I got one of those 5 things done, which frankly was better than I thought I was going to do. This is what a story. Obviously, I think the first thing I thought, really just kind of looking at the teams, is the hilarity of BYU being in the WCC for 10 years, leaving to join the Big 12, the possibility of Gonzaga following them into the Big 12 when BYU, of course, didn't have as much success in the WCC as they'd hoped they would. I was going to say in part because of Gonzaga, but because of Gonzaga directly. So that's a hilarious kind of angle. It's probably not the most important story in this whole thing, but it's something that made me chuckle, at least thinking about it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So the situation for the Zags that people are looking at it, and I've seen your content. You're doing a great job covering this team. You've mentioned, hey, BYU to the Big East, Gonzaga to the Big East, Gonzaga to the Pac-12, and here comes. I mean, this is really one of the true legitimate articles that has got people fully talk. Pete Thamel says, "Look, Brett Yormark made it a point to talk with a Gonzaga athletic director and have this conversation, and now it's a thing we're talking about." So there's so many angles from that perspective. Yeah, because this is the most legitimate interest reporting, whatever you want to call it, that we've seen between them in a conference. And I think that is by design at this point in time.
100%. I think we've heard rumblings for forever that Gonzaga and the Big East were talking. And of course, people put that conference and that school together because Gonzaga is the most successful non-football basketball program in the country. Certainly the most successful, not in the Big East, unquestionably.
Correct. Yes.
Even if you count the Big East, they are the most successful program, at least of the last 5 years or so. So you can see the obvious connections there. So when you start hearing those rumblings, hey, they've had some conversations, there's been some chatter. It was kind of one of those things that, like, well, yeah, of course they're at least kind of kicking the tires on it. It made sense. It was one of those things that it was not fabricated out of thin air, but kind of could have been, because you can see the connection there. The Pac-12, especially after USC and UCLA left, it was, what are they going to do? The biggest school that has and is still connected to the Pac-12 remains San Diego State, but Gonzaga has been in that conversation. We started to hear a little bit more rumblings of that in the last couple of weeks, but I really think that while I think that it's obviously a serious conversation, there's clearly some depth to this. I think that the fact that it's coming out that it's a really well-sourced person through ESPN is like you said, by design. Gonzaga, there's a lot of conversations, as you know more than anybody, between the Big 12 and the Pac-12. There have been some battles there, some kind of one-upping from the commissioners. And now you're seeing a situation where Gonzaga kind of throws themselves right in the middle of it and says, all right, instead of us just feeling like we have the Mountain West or bust, now we're going to put ourselves in a position where there's a bidding war and there's legitimate conversation from multiple conferences about how can we figure out a way to get this little school in this little town of Spokane, Washington into a Power 5 conference.
And I think the thing that people sleep on with basketball is that the amount of inventory that it provides these television networks. Look, like football is king, sure, but basketball is more constant. It is more consistent. It is happening twice a week normally, right? A week and then a Saturday. And if you had Gonzaga into the mix of the Big 12 find me one night of the week where you can't put an absolute banger on. And look, Gonzaga doesn't matter who they've played. And I'll say this, I think the Big 12 is the best college basketball league in the country. Stick Gonzaga on the road in any Big 12 venue. It's sold out. It doesn't matter. I don't care. I'm a little biased. I'm not sure that's the case. In the Pac-12. I love it. But like, if Gonzaga goes and plays Stanford, they might have a great crowd. Go and play Cal, they might have a great crowd. But I'm not sure it's going to be Lubbock, Texas. Or maybe Manhattan, Kansas, or Allen Fieldhouse, or go to Iowa State. I mean, this would be, no questions, hands down, point blank period, the best college basketball conference in America.
Absolutely. And it's funny. I saw a tweet recently, as I've just been glued to the screen since this news came out, that kind of talks about how if this were to happen, this is not just the Big 12 getting better. This is the Big East specifically getting worse. They no longer have the opportunity to add, because they're tossing around a lot of schools right now. And some of the schools they're tossing around are very good. Dayton is a school that has gotten a lot of attention as a potential Big East target. St. Louis, Loyola Chicago, like those are great high profile programs that would be good additions to the Big East, but they're not going to join the Big East and be the best team or even a top 3 team. Maybe Dayton sneaks into the top 5 or so. Gonzaga joins the Big East. They're one of the top 3 teams in that conference. Gonzaga joins the Big 12.
They're the best team. They're the best team.
Yeah, they're the best team. Gonzaga joins the Big 12. They're right.
I'm an impartial person. I mean, I don't really care. I don't in that fight. That's the best. No pun intended. That's the best team right there.
The Big 12 is the only conference they could join where there's a legitimate conversation about them being as low as 3rd. They're top 3 for sure. They're probably won this season, but like they're going to have a lot of competition. The ACC, obviously, with North Carolina is a little bit different, but like with the Big 12, Gonzaga joins, they become a top tier program clearly, but they're not right at the top. And I think that's what Mark Few wants. I think that's what this program wants, is like, they've heard for 20 years that, they're not challenging conference play. They're not challenging conference play. It hurts them when they get into the NCAA tournament. And, the Zags have 0 national championships in that time. So does the Big Ten. That can be a conversation for another time, but there is obviously a reason that Gonzaga wants to get more challenged. They also want to get more money, because this is always, at the end of the day, about money 100% of the time. There are obvious barriers that would need to be addressed in order for this to happen. But if Gonzaga is going to play a better schedule, play top tier teams, play in front of sold out crowds, which I think would absolutely happen in the Big 12,
it would happen. No doubt.
I mean, that's a no-brainer. That's a win-win right there for the Zags.
So the competition piece of this is to me one of the most interesting, because I saw last year they played Texas Tech, right? And they beat Texas Tech, and I thought pretty handily. The thing is that's different is Tech gets to run the gauntlet of the Big 12, and that forces you to figure it's that grinding, it's that making you into a diamond type situation, and it's not always Gonzaga's fault. It's the reason why they challenge themselves in non-conference, in my opinion, is because they have to get themselves. It's not to boost a resume. They don't need that. They're so good now. They don't have to have that. But it's because, like when Arkansas shows up and they got like Jalen Williams in the post, it's like, you haven't seen a guy like that in months. And it's really challenging. This would, I mean, I'll tell you what, like, I don't mean to be pro Zags. Let's do it. Great. It's all, but like, this is kind of this is like the best thing possible. I'll take 4 or 5, 6, give me 6 conference losses. I don't care. Did my team get better? Did my team round themselves into form? And Tech's a great example last year. They go all the way and they play Duke in the Elite 8. Like, this is the best case scenario. This is what they've been asking for. I know the Pac-12 can give you some of that, but they don't give you on a night in, night out basis. There's a reason why the Big 12, the last 3 national championship games, has had Tech, who has been minutes, shots, seconds away. They've had KU and Baylor as champions. There's a reason why. It's because this thing perfects you, basically.
Absolutely. I mean, the Pac-12 without USC and UCLA, so few challenges. Few challenges.
True. Yeah, very true.
Conference. Exactly. I mean, those are basketball. I mean, UCLA obviously is a basketball powerhouse. USC has been a bit more.
Enfield's done a great job. They're a challenge now that helps you get better.
They are unquestionably. And for Gonzaga, like you look at, look at their schedule this year. Their first 3 weeks are murderous. They got Michigan State in less than 2 weeks. 5 days after that, they got Texas. 4 days after that, they got Kentucky. 5 days after that, they're in the PK 85, which could include Duke and Purdue. And then a week after that, they play Baylor. Like, it is a ridiculous, murderous stretch. And they have to do that because from January to February, they get St. Mary's a couple times. Very good program. They get BYU for one more year, a decent program, but didn't even make the NCAA tournament last year. They get San Francisco, who snuck into the tournament last year, deservedly so, but that's it. That's it. And you see so many arguments that I think there's obviously a lot of conversation around Gonzaga. There has always been a lot of conversation around Gonzaga, and it's often taken to an extreme, but there is some level of truth about Gonzaga not getting tested in conference play. I think people saying, well, Gonzaga lost to Arkansas because they played Pacific in February is not really, doesn't encapsulate the entire truth, but there's an element of truth to that. Would I rather the Zags played Tech in February? Yes, like unquestionably. Right. Tech and Baylor and Kansas? Yeah, 100%. Would I rather the Zags lose 7 games in conference play, get a 3 seed, but be more prepared for the NCAA tournament, more prepared for the physicality of, Baylor's guards, which surprised the heck out of them in the national championship a few years ago? Yeah, I would rather that. And I think a lot of Gonzaga fans would agree. We would rather see a team that's tested more, that we're excited about the start of the season, and then we can stay excited as we get into conference play because we still got high profile games, and it's not just kind of circling St. Mary's and then waiting 3 weeks, because that's sort of how it feels like right now. And it's not that watching Gonzaga basketball isn't enjoyable when they pound the crap out of teams, but you got to wonder at what point does Mark Few think, hey, we're just not getting better? And clearly the moves he's trying to make now, I think they're there.
Yeah, I think recruiting wise too. You're going to be in Texas. You're going to be a whole lot of time in Texas. As good as they are in football, they have some kids in basketball. There's a lot of kids who play, who play sport, and then go to Florida as well. You'll be all around in this new Big 12. And that's kind of, it's almost like the AAU circuit, right? I mean, those kids play a national schedule. Guess what? The Big 12 we will too. So to flip it to the Big 12 perspective now, it's interesting, right, Andy, that we're hearing this.
Yeah.
Right off the heels of the announcement of the Big 12 TV deal. Yeah. And a lot of people have already seen it, been saying, well, financially, what does it do? You have to understand something, that I think the basketball side of this is a little bit separate. Is that there will be some conversations had between ESPN and Fox about, look, is this a $30 million ad? No, it's not. It's not the football ad. But if we're going to be offering you Gonzaga programming on ESPN, which already has it, but I'll give you Gonzaga versus Baylor, Gonzaga Kansas, Gonzaga Tech, as opposed to Gonzaga USF, we'll probably give you a little bump here. We'll probably and Fox, who's had no Big 12 basketball content, who just bought into the Big 12 basketball content, at least in terms of the last deal, this deal they just have. Oh, Gonzaga is a welcome addition for them as well. So look, this is not adding Arizona State for football. Football moves everything, but like the Big 12's aggression continues because this is a helpful move. I'm not sure what the numbers will end up looking like, but this is a helpful move, I think, for all parties involved. And also, it's a further move that puts heat on one George Kliavkoff too.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and that's kind of what I wanted to ask you about a little bit, was like when the Pac-12 moves first happened, when the USC UCLA thing happened, which kind of kickstarted this whole new round of conference realignment. One of the big talking points that immediately happened was the kind of definitely overblown fear that the Pac-12 was going to like disintegrate and just get picked off entirely. I know a lot of Oregon State fans who were like, are we going to be in the Mountain West a year from now? Like this legitimate concern at the time, which, again, has blown over. But the Big 12 was known to be somewhat aggressively looking for at least the corner schools or some level of moving west. Spokane is probably not the city that the Big 12 had in mind in terms of media markets. I suspect that Boulder was more appealing, or Tucson is more appealing in those situations, but Gonzaga is so different. they're a small school, they're a non-football school. You kind of have to throw out some of the traditional like thought processes around those acquisitions. For the Big 12, if they're looking to move west, like is this the kind of thing that you think they're really just trying to needle at the Pac-12, or is this kind of a hey, we want to move westward and this is a good option for us?
Well, it helps on two fronts. So what we have to understand, and Zags fans, if you are not familiar with the New Deal, the way it works is that on the ESPN and Fox are both involved in the deal right now, for the Big 12 moving forward in 2025, that will pay out roughly $380 million a year, 31.6 per program. ESPN has said that for each Power 5 school the Big 12 adds, they will pay a full share of what they're paying at Kansas State or Baylor or whatever, in equal part for that school. The Fox side of things, they have not agreed to that. So that's what you understand here.
Yeah.
So that makes the calculus for adding Pac-12 schools a bit different.
Right.
And it basically makes it, all right, you would take most likely a short-term financial hit to try and destabilize that league. And then in 2031, when your next deal is up, you say, well, who's got West Coast programming? Because we took 4 of their schools. Yeah. And that league is not in great shape. So that's a calculated risk. Yeah. Or they could wait on that and say, maybe that's a 5 to 10 year move. And let's go take a team in Washington.
Yeah.
A state where the Pac-12 is already in.
Yep.
And let's make the best basketball league in America already better. And look, maybe it takes a small cost. I don't know. Maybe it is. But there's some value in this move because Fox wanted in on, once again, wanted in on basketball in this conference. Yeah, for a reason. Yeah. If you add Gonzaga to that, did the conference lose value? No, it's already more valuable. Right. I mean, who's been playing in the last of these national championship games? Gonzaga versus Baylor. Guess what? We're part of the Big 12. Texas Tech, Kansas, Baylor, all these schools, man, are around. They're in this thing. Yeah. So I think that with this move, it is part of it's not just needling, it's saying we're taking a team in your territory. Yeah. A school that is putting guys in the NBA now very consistently. Yeah. We'll take that out of the portfolio and we're coming for the football. The football's coming next. We'll do the basketball first. I think that might be part of this move, but I think it's about the aggression. Yeah. They decided to do an early deal, which some people will say, well, should you wait? No, Brett Yormark said, let's go and do it now. They came to town. I believe it was the Tennessee game, right? They were playing Tennessee. And guess what? Brett Yormark said, you're in our neighborhood. Let's have a talk. Now, it sounds like it's exploratory, but the Big 12, they want it. They want Gonzaga as part of the portfolio, and they want it badly. In my opinion, they do, to make a point that they're not sitting on their laurels from November until April. They're saying we are the team. We are the player. When football turns off, it's all about us.
Well, and that's kind of exactly the next point that I was going to make is like the Big 12 is the best basketball conference. Gonzaga or not right now. I mean, you look at obviously the addition of Houston is massive in that regard. Houston is a top 5 program.
They might win it this year. They have a good chance to win it this year, right? I mean,
if Houston gets to the Final Four, and the Final Four, which is being played in Houston, I think they might win that thing. Like that is a really good program over there with Marcus Sasser, the team that they have. And so you add them in the mix. You obviously, Baylor is one of the best programs over the last 5 years. Kansas has been one of the best programs over the last couple of decades. It's just, I wonder for the Big 12, if it's just really a move of like, you know what, we just want to cement this. We are the basketball conference. Clearly Big 12 football is not bad, but it is not at the SEC or the Big 10. And those programs have continued to add and obviously pulled away from the Big 12 and are now pulling away from the Pac-12. So I wonder how much of this for the Big 12 is just like, you know what, this is a move we can make that makes us better in the second most important sport. And you kind of alluded to it, we'll worry about the football later, but we're going to make this move right now. We're going to piss off the Pac-12 a little bit, and we're going to pull in the best team we can to make this conference even better.
Yeah. It's also too, like, people forget, I mean, basketball, that tournament is $1 billion industry. And nobody who covers hoops is like, you know what we need? more teams. And they're like, we should have more teams because this thing just keeps cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. It's like we talked about it a few weeks ago on the crossover that we do between the Big 12 hosts. We're like, we all want college football playoff expansion. Yeah. Nobody wants NCAA tournament expansion. But you know why they're doing it? Because it makes them so much money. It is a billion-dollar industry. Look, the college football is a multi-billion-dollar industry, but still, college hoops is a billion-dollar industry. Guys, the NBA is only on ESPN like Wednesdays and then Fridays, and then they do the Saturday night special. They do some Sunday night specials, whatever. College basketball is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. There is the Big 12, the ACC, and whoever else, and there's the A10 on Fridays, and there's everybody on Saturdays, and then there's the AAC on Sundays. Like, it's inventory. You can bank it, and if you can bank these, just put Gonzaga in any Big 12 city, Manhattan, Ames, West Virginia. They go to West Virginia. Even UCF or Houston. Jesus, oh my God! Could you imagine? Oh my God, Madhouse. They go to Houston.
It's gonna be
all these
bonkers.
Places. It's gonna be Dan Schulman and Jay Billis are gonna be following around Gonzaga on this tour, and also I know HBO did the series a few years ago, which I really enjoyed, the series following Gonzaga. Good Lord, could you imagine HBO series or an ESPN Plus series chronicling Gonzaga's first year in the Big 12? Mark Few being like, we knew it'd be tough, but good God, this is hard, and it's brutal. It's what we wanted, but it's hard. All of it. Feed me all of it, because God bless the Pac-12, and I don't want to take away their programs and their schools. It's great. But this is just a little bit different. November through April, November through March, when everybody has to go everywhere, and then when they convene in Kansas City. And I want to see all the Zags fans. I want to see them in KC at Power and Light, getting ready for the Big 12 tournament there. Oh my God. I want it so badly. It's like it's basketball nirvana, and basketball still matters. It still matters. It's not football, but it still matters. It's where the Fox wanted a piece of it.
I'll say too, like, I've been to Matthew Knight Arena where the Ducks play in Eugene. I've been to Alaska Airlines Arena where the Huskies play. I've been to Washington State. I've been to Oregon State. Yeah, I would much rather play my away games in the Big 12. Like, I would way rather, even locally. Yes, there's a rivalry between Gonzaga and UW. There has been for a long time. There's some bad blood there. Gonzaga and Washington State. I've been to those games. I've been to those games in Pullman, and it's an environment for sure, but it is not what you're going to face in those other towns. It's just not. And I know Mark Few knows that. I know the Gonzaga players know that. The recruiting bump is there. And you mentioned the money aspect of it. And like, the amount of money Gonzaga is going to bring in on a per game basis doesn't light a candle to what the football teams bring in. But Gonzaga, you get a bunch of them. You get a whole bunch of them. You get 8 Saturdays of regular season games. And those Saturdays are going to be, Kansas and Baylor and Texas Tech and all those teams. And every single one of those games is going to be a banger. Every one of those games.
And also, like, you saw what Texas Tech did. Texas Tech's a football school. It's Texas Tech. When Chris Beard came there last year, came back. It was just absolute scenes. Yeah. And you put Gonzaga there, it's like, feed us. Let's do it. Let's put these guys. It's going to be great. And when they go back to the what is it? The Zags Arena holds, what is it?
6,000.
Oh, it's going to be, and the folks, the kids in the Big 12 will be like, these guys are on top of us.
They're right on top of you.
To us every week. Oh my God, what's happening here? God love the Pac-12 and the Big East too. It's just a basketball conference. But like, there is some St. John's games at MSG where you're like, man, it's a Sunday, we're playing Butler, and who the hell cares? There's none of those. There are not any of those. Not in the Big 12. We don't have a damn game like that. So that's why it makes so insane. And look, the money part of it's interesting. Andy, I'm not sure what that looks like. Yeah. But I don't know a world in which it hurts either party. Right. How does it hurt anybody?
Well, that's what I was thinking too, is like, people were like, well, Gonzaga is not going to get as big of a piece because they're not a football program. And I was like, there's 0% chance that the amount of money they would get from the Big 12 is less than what they get from the WCC. It is going to be much, much much more. And it's maybe a smaller piece than every other school in the Big 12. I kind of don't know how it isn't. It would have to be because they don't have football. There's just no way. And right now, what Gonzaga has done, they renegotiated with the WCC in 2018 because they threatened to leave, and the Mountain West unanimously agreed to accept them. And then the WCC all of the sudden caved to every single one of Mark Few's demands. One of those demands was a bigger piece of the pie from the NCAA tournament revenue. Mark Few had a point. He said, we're splitting this revenue 10 ways. I am the only team that is making the NCAA tournament. Why are you getting all of my money? And the WCC changed it. I worked at the University of Portland when that happened. They were not happy that they were losing some of that money. But what are you going to do? They knew even then, hey, we're holding this program by a thread. Like, there's no way they didn't know that. And one of the big elements of this that I'm still very fascinated by is Gonzaga has more than basketball, contrary to some people's popular belief.
Their baseball program is excellent and would fit right in with the Big 12. They have a really good baseball program. The report, I believe, from Pete Thamel said that this move would include all of Gonzaga's sports. Correct.
That's the only way that I think it works. For one key reason that a lot of people I think don't really think about is they're like, well, Gonzaga will just move basketball and they'll leave the rest of the sports in WCC. And I was like, the WCC is going to put a big old no stamp on that. Why would they do that? And the Gonzaga athletic department can't go to the rest of their sports and say, hey, so we're going to shuffle you guys into the Big Sky so we can move our basketball programs over to the Big East or Big 12 or whatever. That's just not an option. So for the Zags, it has to be all or nothing, I think. And traveling your tennis programs to West Virginia there's a hurdle there.
It's going to be an NBA type situation with that, right? I mean, I was thinking about this, when it comes to hoops, it's going to have to be I think you could do the NBA does it, a Wednesday versus West Virginia or Cincinnati, a Saturday versus West Virginia, a Tuesday against UCF. Or if you wanted to bump it up and you can go, Tuesday against Cincinnati, Friday night, maybe. If you want to start doing the Friday night basketball thing, get in on that. They can do it because there's nothing happening on Friday nights in January. Let's be honest, there's nothing happening. So if you want to put, stick a nice little West Virginia on Gonzaga on a Friday night at 8:00, I wouldn't care about that. That'd be fine with me. Right. And then you go on Sunday, maybe Sunday, they do like the ABC games in the AAC. Well, maybe ESPN goes, how about a little ABC action, UCF Gonzaga, 2:00 on ABC? Sure, count me in for that. I'm down for that. That's kind of the way this is going to have to work. Now, the baseball side of it, does Gonzaga have softball?
No, they don't have softball. They have soccer. Yeah.
All right, so that's good. So that side of it has to be figured out. But you can do 2 soccer games in 3 or 4 days. It's not overly bad. They're college kids. They got the lungs for it. Yeah. So it can be figured out. Like there's a reason to have the conversation. If it couldn't be done, they wouldn't be doing it. Right.
And I mean, those are conversations that are probably haven't quite happened yet. Maybe they've happened conversationally, but like if the athletic department for the Zags is coming back, Chris Staniford, the AD, if him and the staff are kind of sitting down to figure this out, they're going to look at like how much more classes are kids going to miss, how much more money are we going to spend on flights, how much, like they have to do this cost benefit analysis and figure all of this out. I'm guessing they have done a lot of it already. Whether they've done it very specifically with the Big 12, I don't know, but I suspect that I don't see any of that being the actual hurdle. It would, if the Big 12 wants them, if Gonzaga wants to go to the Big 12, if the Big 12 is going to take all of the sports, this stuff will get figured out. How long it takes, how much money Gonzaga, all of that stuff, I don't know the answer to, and it might take a while to figure it all out. But at the end of the day, if these two sides want to get this done and nobody else comes in and outbids the Big 12 for Gonzaga, which is, to be clear, that's what they want. I think they want to go to the Big 12, but they also want to have a bidding war. They want the Pac-12 to come offer them something obscene. They want other conferences that we haven't even talked about yet to potentially get involved as well. And if that doesn't happen, though, and the Big 12 can make it work, I don't think that how we're going to pay to travel our tennis team is going to be an issue. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't think that that's going to stop.
And here's, I know we're running long here, but like this is the one thing we haven't mentioned is the Pac-12 has not gotten their TV deal sorted out yet. And especially, so here's the thing is like, people are debating what do the TV networks, and Amazon has been really mentioned as a player there. What do they want in terms of football? Well, what do they want in terms of basketball?
Right, exactly.
With you mentioned earlier, with no SC and no UCLA, what am I paying for with hoops here? It's just kind of inventory. It's who in that there now sticks out. Oregon is the one program who's consistently stuck out, and Arizona is as well.
Yeah.
So those are kind of your big two you've got there. But everybody else involved, there's no programs that really stick out for you. And so is Amazon going to pay for a basketball package? Are they going to bring the money for that? Because I'll bring this up again. Fox wanted in on Big 12 hoops.
Yeah.
They wanted in on that as part of this.
Yeah.
And so how does I'm really trying to think in my head, like, how does the Pac-12 make an overture to Gonzaga where it's like, sure, we can give you the money that we want? Because I think the Big 12 is not coming to Gonzaga unless they're saying, look, we can give you the exposure and then maybe not an immediate, but down the line, the money that you want, because we've created the greatest basketball league in the history of NCAA basketball.
Right.
The Pac-12 deal and not having one right now and where it might be has to be figured into this conversation.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. If I'm a organization looking to potentially bid on Pac-12 basketball, like, yes, them having Gonzaga would be a huge bump, but you're still talking about a few more marquee games. Gonzaga at Oregon, Gonzaga at Arizona. Gonzaga at Washington's a good game because they're rivals, but that game has been happening every year.
Why not?
Yeah, but like that's it. Arizona State, not good. Stanford, Cal, haven't been good in a long time. Oregon State, terrible last year. Washington State, mid-level team. Like none of these teams are, with the exception of Oregon and Arizona, none of those teams are close to even average in the Big 12. They're not even close. And so if the ability for the Pac-12 to offer Gonzaga more money when they would be going to a conference that has tremendously more successful basketball programs just doesn't seem likely.
No, it really doesn't. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
All right. So Andy, if you had to say right now, and I know we're reacting to this stuff, what do you think is the most likely scenario? It feels like the least likely, at least, is that they remain in the the WCC. Right?
Yeah.
That's probably over. But look, it's time for them to graduate. I think it's also better for the sport if they do. That program deserves a chance to compete and win.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like you said, we're reacting to this live, so there's still so many pieces. The Big 12 makes the most sense. I feel that strongly. I think the Big East makes a ton of sense too, because they're a basketball conference. They don't have football. That element is just removed entirely. The travel is comparable. I think it's worse in the Big East, but I don't think dramatically worse. I think it's about the same. The Big East doesn't line up with some of Gonzaga's other sports all of that well. I don't think that that's going to be a huge part of the conversation, but it is a part of it. But to me, the Big 12, with the fact that Gonzaga and Baylor already have this relationship, Gonzaga and Kansas are obviously two of the top tier programs. They've played Tech in the past. Like there's a lot of kind of relationships that already exist there.
We haven't mentioned also the religious piece part of this too.
Yeah.
The Big 12 has, look, I'm not sure how big it is. I really don't know.
Yeah.
But the Big 12 has multiple religiously affiliated schools.
Yes.
In adding one too. BYU's coming on.
Yeah.
Who is obviously Mormon. You've got Baylor that is I think it's Baptist. Yeah. And then you've got TCU, which is a whatever they are, how they are. But like they've got this conversation. Like they've got that. The Pac-12, and it was BYU's case maybe, has been against that. So
the Pac-12 straight up rejected BYU specifically because
on that basis.
Yeah, which makes them trying to get Gonzaga a lot harder. A lot of people are talking about how the Pac-12 might have fumbled the bag here for a lot of reasons, but that's an element of it. Gonzaga is not following BYU to the Big 12. That BYU doesn't really have anything to do with this.
Right. Totally correct.
The Pac-12 making this big old stink of we're only doing football. I mean, they've been adamant about that. We are only taking football schools. We're only taking high major, big research institutions. They made a huge stink about this, and now they might lose a really prominent basketball program in their backyard, and that's part of it. The reason why. That's part of it.
I mean, so you think that's why you balance it. You say the travel to the Big East, right? And it's not a conference. It's basically the same, a little bit worse maybe to the Big East.
Yeah.
And they're not everything else in the conference, right? They don't have everything else, like you mentioned, matched up other sports.
Yeah.
The Big 12 has the deal and the other sports and the hoops.
Yeah.
The Pac-12 has, while it's closer, has no TV deal yet, and also is against the religious institutions.
Pac-12's only advantage is geography. That's it. That's
only the advanced geography, which sometimes does swing the day.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like the best fit is come home, to the Big 12. We will BYU fans or BYU Gonzaga and BYU fans too. The big hug. We'll give you guys the big hug. It's coming. Andy, where can people find you and your work and all of its variety?
Yeah, absolutely. It's Locked On Zags podcast. You can find that wherever you listen to podcasts, also on YouTube as well. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Patton CBB. Whole bunch of tweets all about this story, and obviously as the season gets started and unfolds.
You guys can find me on Twitter at @JoshNeighbors_. You guys can find the show at LO Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you podcast. There will be more coverage on this as it comes. Hopefully it becomes clearer. It sounds like it's exploratory right now, but let's hope it's thumbs up and we're on the way. Andy, it was nice talking to you.
You too.